I have this new food plot here, and I wanted to talk about step by step how we're going to bring this into a beautiful field going into this hunting season. Right now it's early May, and this is actually the time where I like to have our food plots cleared. We have another one we need to do the same thing to. This one was actually bulldozed. You can see this area back here. It's used to be actually farm field, which is crazy to think that they actually farmed all the way back to here. And so we're clearing some of this idle ag land, but when they did that, there's so much erosion that went over the bank. So when we're clearing this right now, we have this elevation change, and it's all angling inward here, but this is like a flat spot to us around here, so it was a nice little spot to clear out. We wanted to make sure we address soil erosion, and so that's really important around here. It's an important aspect of everything we do for food plotting. We have to address that because out in the ag fields, they're still not addressing it fully. So we get some of that runoff onto our property from the ag fields, and we want to stop here. We can do that food plotting, it's a little bit easier. On the ag fields with big equipment, you risk erosion a lot more unless you're really sold into and bought into all no-till. And so we are with our food plotting program. So one of the first things we had to do was we clear this in April, and we have this nice little opening here, maybe a 1/4 acre. But was to make sure that we're not eroding the soil, plus we want to build the soil, and we want to combat weeds all at the same time. So how do we do that? We do that with annual rye. Annual rye typically is a fall planting for a deer attraction, but in the spring, it's a soil builder, it's a weed controller, and then it helps us combat erosion. So we came in here, we were probably at right around 200 pounds per acre of rye. We are not bringing this rye to a seed head. So we're not worried about seed head production and getting the most out of our rye and harvesting. We're not doing that. And we're not worrying about deer eating it, because once you see all this green in the woods around me, the deer have more food than they know what to do with, and it's quality food. So nothing we can do with food plotting will help them in any way for this time of year. And at the same time, they don't need this for food. So the rye is perfect because this time of year, once you see spring green up and the rye's popping, the deer don't eat the rye. We don't necessarily want them to eat it. We don't want them in here heavy eating this. We want this to grow and to actually grow into a really nice mat of rye that's very, very thick and dense so that we can get it up to, we don't want to get 4 feet high. We don't want it to dry out because that's all organic matter that takes years to break down in the soil when you get that old rye thatch. We never want to get it there. People ask me, what do we do with the rye? When do we take it out? Well, we take it out when it's 12, 15 inches high. So I want to get this up to about in here. It's going to be lower, lush, green, but we're still going to be able to look at the soil through the rye and see a lot of openings. Now, I'll talk about the reason for that and why that's important, but we're going to have this rye grow for about another 3 weeks, I'd say, 4 weeks, right around there. And then we will terminate it once it gets to that height. Now we can terminate it by mowing. We can mow it, kill it, and if we have to mow it again, we would, but you can mow it that way, killing it. We prefer to use a herbicide application because, and Dylan, I'll try to get it out to where it's not my shadow in here, but in here we already have various pieces of green and weeds coming in. You can see some briars down here and then weeds. And so those are starting to come in, and they're kind of a welcome sight in the food plot. We want those weeds coming in because if they're not coming in, you can't kill them. So when we see little trees sprouting and briars and weeds, then we know we're going to be able to get a good kill on that. And we're going to have to do that because if we have weeds in this plot and we don't address weeds, they're just going to take over the plot no matter what we plant, and we'll never get a good planting. So the rye has a natural weed suppressant built in. So that rye comes in, it helps limit weeds, but we're going to get weeds. They're not going to get overrun. They're not going to go to seed head. And then we're going to kill that. We're going to first, because you can see the soil, we can then broadcast buckwheat at 50 pounds per acre in here. If you have poor soil, you might want to go a little bit more, 60, 70 pounds per acre, because you're not going to get as much volume. We have good soil here. Again, this is all the soil from out in those ag fields coming down in here. So it's pretty decent soil looking at it. But we're going to be able to broadcast that buckwheat, and all those seeds will go right on the soil. At the same time, we're going to spray this and get rid of it. And we could probably just go with a application of 2 quarts per acre of glyphosate. It's the weakest herbicide. And if we do see problem weeds coming in here, briars are problem weeds. It takes a lot to kill briars, trees. I suspect we might have some of that. Then we can mix 2 quarts per acre of glyphosate. We can mix 1 pint per acre of 2,4-D. We can spray, but then we have to wait about 7 days to broadcast that buckwheat. That rye will just be laying there dead. We'll spray it. We can come in. There'll be enough opening because we're only allowing that rye to get 12, 15 inches high. So there'll be a lot of soil exposure for those seeds to get on the ground and actually germinate. So we're going to terminate the rye. It will have done its job by that point. It'll still be holding the soil together. And then when the buckwheat comes in, the buckwheat is even more of a magical planting where you get full canopy cover. It's a smother crop, so it smothers out weeds. It shades the soil, gives it a greenhouse effect, so it doesn't dry out the soil. And oh, by the way, it combats erosion too. Now, both of those, the rye and the buckwheat, puts back into the soil. Really good fine organic mass root balls in those first 2-3 inches of the soil. So they'll sit in there, they lift the soil, they help avoid compaction, and it gives us some really good nutrients going back in the soil, and the buckwheat's going to do the same thing. So we're going to start with the rye, then the buckwheat. Buckwheat's going to be around June 1st, somewhere around that date. And then when we get into the end of July, that buckwheat's going to grow for approximately 7 to 8 weeks. That buckwheat should be around in this range. Then we're going to spray it again because there'll be problem low broadleafs coming in below the buckwheat. Won't smother out all weeds. We're going to spray, roll, and then we'll wait and we'll seed about 7 to 10 days after we terminate the buckwheat. Now I want to give you guys a note really quick. And most of you that watch this show understand this, but we have our seed company, Pure Wildlife Blends. We sell buckwheat and we sell rye. We do that as a convenience for our customers. You're buying a bunch of other seed blends, the stuff that's cheaper on shipping. You order that, you need 1 bag of rye, a couple bags of rye, buckwheat. You're already spending shipping, we're already sending a bunch to you. Well, it's a convenience for you. We're not doing it because we want you to buy buckwheat rye through us. In fact, if you go to a local feed mill, you're going to probably find it a lot cheaper, and you just go pick it up and you can buy a lot more, and you don't have shipping. Shipping's a lot on those big bags of seed. It's 48 pounds at a time that we sell it. So we encourage you to buy it elsewhere if you can. In a pinch, for convenience, we do offer it. And I will point out really quick, we have to charge a lot for it because we pay a lot for it. We pay its pure seed, and we're not buying it from, someone's pole building in Illinois or wherever it is, and then selling it and just marking it up a little bit. It's actually our lowest profit margin seed that we sell. Not to get into numbers too much, but we make the least amount of money on buckwheat, and rye is probably second. We don't make any money. In fact, if we only made money, that amount of net profit on those, we'd go into a show like Shark Tank, they'd laugh us off the stage. We couldn't have a viable business if any of you watch that show, but they'd laugh at us. It wouldn't be enough to actually run a business. And so we try to keep those costs low, but again, go somewhere else if you can find it. And we'll offer it as a convenience, and we appreciate you checking that out. We're putting the rye in buckwheat, smother crops for weeds. They help control weeds. They help insulate the soil, keep it from drying out, keep it from eroding. They put nutrients back in. So there's a lot of benefits to both of those. But the real end goal is once we get into the fall, and we want something that'll be attractive to deer because we plan to hunt this little hunting plot here. And that's where we start to convert this to all clover and perennial, which will be in, this is 2025, that'll come in 2026. So once we terminate that buckwheat, and let's say we're using 2,4-D where we have to wait at least 7 to 10 days to plant again, because if you have immediate germination, that 2,4-D is still in the soil. The glyphosate's not going to hurt it, but the 2,4-D will. So you want to wait. By then, the buckwheat is completely brown, really easy to seed right into it. It gets on the soil. Those small seeds germinate really well. And we are never going to plow, disc, or till this in any way. There's no reason to, by any means. In fact, there's dozer marks from when it was cleared, and I expect in the fall we'll have perennial clover growing still within these dozer tracks. These dozer tracks will compact down a little bit and smooth down, but they're still going to be there. And again, we're never going to plow, disc, or till this area, and we don't need to. We haven't on any of our food plots. It's the 6th season out here in Minnesota. We never do. We don't want the erosion concerns. We want to work on that top layer of topsoil. So once we apply that seed, we'll put a mix in here. We have our 365 blends, Big Boost 365, something I've been doing for about 25 years, is blending perennials with brassica or other plantings with perennials, oats, rye, peas, lots of different things, so that you have your cool season annual as an attraction for the fall, like the brassica, and then you're left with the perennial blend the following year. We put a lot of research into that, meaning I found that you can't have a lot of leafy brassica structure because it can actually shade out the clover. You can't mix, for example, clover and rye and expect to get a good catch, because if the rye is too thick and you're planting it at the same time, the rye can actually shade out the clover and kill it. Rye is shade tolerant. Doesn't mean it grows well in partial shade, but it's not shade proof. So if it's in full shade, it's going to die. So we open up that canopy a little bit with our brassica blend that we mix with the perennial. We also replace that with annual clover that doesn't compete with the perennial clover. And then we take out a high percentage of the bulbs that are in there, the purple tops, green globes, big bulbs like that, because every spot there's a bulb growing the following year or rotting in the spring, that's a place that clover won't grow. That's a place that weeds will come in July the following year, late June. So we limit the percentage of that. We try to still offer a broad-based brassica attraction blend that has a few bulbs for later, earlier, tillage radish, for example, that helps improve the soil. For the early portion of the season, they eat those first. So bottom line is we have a good brassica crop, or maybe we'll use our fall power 365 or both in side by side. But bottom line is those 365 blends have that perennial blend that'll go into 2026. So we're going to take this from rye to buckwheat to a brassica or fall green blend with the perennial base. And then we'll go into the following spring and it'll be that perennial base. And really at that time, we shouldn't have to come in here and frost seed clover at all to fill in any spots. If we did, we'd go very, very light. Less than a half a setting. You're just putting a little bit because we don't want too much chicory. We have chicory in that blend. You don't want to double the blend, because now you get double the chicory, and that's a bad thing. So we'll have the perennial going into the following year, and by the end of June, we'll have flowers on that clover. The alfalfa will be stemming out, and it'll be a great time to mow. That helps control weeds. We followed up with a liquid fertilizer from Deer Grow, and we get a jump start on our clover. And by the fall in 2026, we'll have a very luscious, thick stand of clover like we have done on a lot of our small clover hunting plots on the property. And what I really like about clover is it establishes a pattern of use. You'll have a buck come through you. They'll feed on it during the summer a few times. They know it's here in the fall. It's not big enough to establish, because we have 19 acres of plots out here. There's only a quarter acre. We only have about a little over 2 acres of clover out of all 19. So we don't have enough to create a big doe herd hitting that clover every day. They have all the alfalfa out in the fields around here anyways. So bottom line is we have really good clover. Like a stand like this will be really appreciable even in going into early December. So it's a great hunting food plot just to pass through to get to the big plot somewhere else with more diversity and more volume. And that's how we're starting the life of this plot. Now, I could get into, if you don't start this till June, you do this. If you start in August, do this. And the only thing I can say is when you start early like this, it gives you a lot more of an ability to have a quality blend going into this fall. You can start this. We could start this plot in September. We could doze it out, and then we're probably going to use straight rye, maybe a little bit of oats. It's going to be a really thick covering, and it's not going to be as attractive going in the fall, and that's what you're sacrificing. You're also sacrificing weed control. So we're going to be able to get 2 great weed controls with weed suppression plantings too. So we'll get weed control with sprayings and weed control with suppression plantings, and then that'll go into the fall. So we'll get some great weed control. We'll be able to build the soil. We'll be able to keep it from eroding, and then we'll get a great, really high quality crop going into the fall, and then finally the clover for the following year. So that's why I like to start early, and we'll show you the progression along the way. But bottom line is we'll have really good success with this. We could start later. I probably wouldn't go with the perennial blend if we were starting in September as a base. I'd want to build up that soil the following year, but I'd do it for the following year. So if we're starting later, we're just lowering the value and attraction, upping the availability of planting that's going to succeed 100%. We're using no frill plantings of rye and oats in the fall if we're starting late, so we can at least have something, and then we go from there. So I hope that makes sense, but you know, ultimately we can't wait to hunt over this. And we already had Wes was out here and put rye in this within a couple days. It wasn't that long anyways after this was dozed out. Rye's coming in great. You get to take advantage of the spring rains. It'll do a lot of good. And then we'll go from there and we'll bring it to you. We're going to have a blind, I think, right over there in that corner. And so we'll bring some hunts for you this fall. We'll have a mock scrape. It's almost like a mock scrape already hanging right down here. This just happened to be a branch that Jared broke when he was dozing this out, but we'll hang a mock scrape right from here. And I suspect we'll probably have a camera somewhere back here looking at this so we can see the whole plot and the scrape at the same time. The scrape will only be 20 yards in front of the blind. The blind will be hidden behind some brush. We'll get some plantings there in case we have to cover it up even more. And we'll be ready for fall. I hope you are too with your new plots, and this helps you along the way in planning your next great hunting plot or food plot in general.